Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today hosted by PractiTest and part of our PractiTest webinar series 2017. My name is Joel, and I'm going to be taking you today over this webinar on how to become a KICAS tester in today's changing environment. So thank you very, very much for joining today. So before we get started, just a couple of words. Let me check if this still works okay. Okay, here it goes. So just a couple, by the way, yeah, I see some people are asking when we start, so obviously we've just started right now. So a little bit about myself before we get started with all the stuff that we want to cover today. So I have been a tester for a little bit over 20 years. This is not updated. And during that time, I have been doing many, many roles as part of my testing career. I started obviously as a tester. I've been a QA lead and QA manager. I've also been a consultant, and I have a blog. I will actually point you to that at the end of the session, but it's a pretty nice blog if you want to. If I say it myself, obviously, if you want to hear about what I have to say. I like speaking quite a lot, as I'm doing right now, and so I usually go to conferences and stuff like that. I just got back from a very nice conference in Bilbao on a called QA and Test. And my current job, as I will be explaining within practice, is the job of the Chief Solution Architect. And that basically means that I talk testing quite a lot with many, many organizations in order to understand how can we make a better product. I'm also in charge of all the testing operations within the company. That also keeps me quite busy and also quite happy. Couple of other stuff around the testing community, and again, stuff that I like doing is, first of all, the online test comp that I will talk about it in a couple of minutes, and also for those of you who are aware of the State of Testing Survey, then that's a project that I'm heading currently with La Lead from T10 with Testers. So just to plug PractiTest again, they are sponsoring us, so just to give them a very big hand. PractiTest is a QA management system. It's a testing management system. The idea is that it's a system that actually will help you grow together with your team's needs. So it's end-to-end requirements, tests, runs, issues, also integrates very well with anything that you're working with, being Jira, Selenium, or Jenkins, or again, type of system. It's extremely intuitive and simple to use, but also has quite a lot of functionality. So if you have any needs, or if you're thinking about reviewing an alternative or a new QA management systems, I really recommend that you go ahead and take a look at it. We do have a 2-week free evaluation license so that you can start working with it right away. And not only because I'm part of that organization, but we really have the best support in business, period. I'm sure that you will see that if you get to work with us as well. Enough about PractiTest, and just a very small plug as well, as I was saying. One of the conferences that is very much close to my heart is something called the Online Test Conf, or the Online Testing Conf. And you can see the link at the bottom of the screen, onlinetestconf.com. In summary, basically, even though I get to attend a lot of conferences around the world, not everyone is so lucky. And I really believe, and you will see it in the presentation, I believe that there's quite a lot to gain from the experiences of presenting and taking part of a conference, because we get to talk with our peers and we get to understand what's going on in testing. And it's not fair that only those who have a budget to travel or that their company send them to are able to do this kind of stuff. So we created an online test conf that it's not a webinar. It's basically a conference. You can interact with the presenters, with the speakers, among yourselves. We have lightning talks. Everything's going to be there. The next one is at the end of the month. And not only that, but it's free to attend. You only need to go ahead and reserve your seat. And again, just go ahead into it. It's pretty cool. We have very cool people like James Bach this year, and Danny Fogg. And again, quite a lot of people who are going to be talking, and I do recommend everyone to log in. Oh, someone here already added the link, onlinetestconf.com. Go ahead and sign up. But enough about plugs and stuff. Let's actually start talking about the concept and the subject that we came here to talk about. And that is how to become a KICAS tester on today's ever-changing environment. And the topics that I will want to talk about today are the ones that you see here. I will start talking a little bit about the changes in testing and how the technology and big data and AI are actually affecting or changing the way we work. A little bit about how DevOps and testing is working together. A very big question that many people are asking themselves. Is testing dying? It's a good question. I I have my answer to that, and I will go over that later on. And then some tips and maybe some pointers on how to become a geek as tester. And I do want to say up front, I don't have a recipe. It's not going to be a 1, 2, 3, follow these rules, and you will be a testing ninja or the best tester around. It's mostly about understanding what is going on, trying to provide you with some ideas of what I think are the stuff that is actually happening around testing today, and helping you on some paths and some ideas that will help you to become better testers. Again, these are things that, fortunately, I get to talk with a lot of people, and I do want to share my thoughts. A question that is usually asked, are we going to be sharing the video? Yes, we are. So at the end of the session, we will also be sharing with you the video that we have here. By the way, you can ask questions all the time. There's in the Q&A or the chat, and I will try to answer them towards the end. We will have some time for that at the end of the session. So let's get on with it, guys. What do you say? So first thing first, is testing changing? I don't know. You have been in testing for over 20 years. And obviously, this is a trick question because, you know what? Yes, testing has been changing for quite a while. And if we look at it, lately, maybe during the last 3 years, maybe the last 5 years, we have been changing even faster and in a more radical way than we did, let's say, at the beginning of my career. How is testing been changing? It's basically not because testing itself has been changing, but because development as a let's say a discipline has also been changing. And remember, guys, we're not testing for the sake of testing. Testing is a service that we provide our companies. And so as the people that we're serving, being that developers, product owners, our management, as their needs and the reality is changing, so is the service that we need to provide as testers. And so what has been changing lately? Well, a number of things, actually. If you think about it, maybe the most simple thing, the most trivial thing, is that the amount of environments that we need to test today has changed. I don't know you, but I remember working with client-server systems where we had a client that was installed maybe on your Windows computer, then switching to browsers, and we had maybe 3 browsers, IE, what did we have? IE, and again, a couple of other browsers over there. And slowly, then we had mobile devices with WAP, and then it became a very different ballpark today. We have hundreds of environments, hundreds of devices, anything that needs to be portable between your cell phone and your computer and your tablets, and it can run anywhere that you want. So we are testing quite a lot of stuff, okay? And that's exponential difference from what we used to do. Not only that, but we're releasing faster. We used to be able to release a product every year, maybe every 6 months. You would release service packs or patches. It was every 3 months or a month. Now we're talking about releasing stuff in the best of times once a month, maybe. I talk with a lot of customers all the time, and they're releasing once a month. We have people who are already doing continuous delivery and continuous installments. Okay, so it has been becoming very, very easy to release, or very fast to release. And one of the reasons that it's getting very fast to release is because, and I will be talking about that a little bit later, as we are working, many of us at least, on hosted environment or on cloud environments, then the cost in order to fix a problem actually went down, and it's easier to do it. If we need to patch something, we don't need to send disks to 1,000 customers or 10,000 customers. We simply do it on the side, and so it becomes easier. Okay? Not only that, but automation has also become a commodity. And by a commodity, I mean something that it's more common and most widely used. It used to be the case that, again, people talked about automation, but it was very hard to do it. And I think that with the frameworks and with the applications that we have today, it is easier to do it. It's not only a matter that people are more intelligent, maybe we are, I don't know, but it's easier, okay? And it has become what people used to sell us throughout the ages, that it will become something very easy to do. Right now, it really is something that is at least being grasped and usable by many of us. And finally, and again, looking at it now solely from the testing environment, testing has been changing quite a lot, because as we are switching over to agile approaches, then we do see quite a lot more of testing being done by developers. And so the world as a whole is changing. And this is important to understand. It's not something that started in the last 5 years or in the last 7 years or even in the last 10 years. And it's not only about testing or not only about development. look at it from a broader perspective. The world has been changing for the last 200 or 300 years, and that means that the economy itself is actually pushing us towards technological automation, making things better because we use technology and more automatic, meaning we don't need so much involvement of people. And it started even from the Industrial Revolution and even before that and after that. If you look into this picture here, you will see a factory floor where people were doing quite a lot of work manually. And so you were able to create, I think it's watches that people were doing here, I'm not really sure, but you used to have quite a lot of manual labor. And right now, factories are mostly automatic. And that not only means that it's cheaper to create, you create more, and you're creating, again, more of the same at a better economy of state. And that is what is also happening to the world of development and to the world of testing. And it's important to understand it, okay? And again, just as a teaser, maybe to us as testers will happen the same that used to happen to these manual workers on their factory, where our work is also going to be made redundant or necessary because of technologies that will be coming in the future. But again, not to worry, I don't think that it's going to be happening in the next 5 years. But I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So the world is changing, and if we try to look into a lot of the stuff that is happening now, more focused around the world of development and testing, not only about that, but what I want to do right now is to talk about the big data and the AI revolution. The idea is to understand what is happening here. And again, these are not trends that are solely in testing. If you look into big data and AI, it's happening to the world as a whole, but it's also going to have an effect on testing. When we say that it's happening in the world as a whole, where do we see it? Well, you actually are seeing it everywhere. Think about Google. The fact that you're getting good answers to the stuff that you're looking for, even if you're not writing that correctly, it's because Google is using big data and AI approaches in order to provide you not the information that you're looking for, but the information they understand you're looking for, even though you didn't write it correctly. I don't know how many of you are using the application called Waze. I use it almost daily in order to get from A to B. It's a very good driving navigation application that uses, again, big data and community and crowdsourcing in order to make sure that when you're going to be driving from point A to point B, you get up-to-the-minute updates on the traffic jams and where to go and where not to go. So this is also use of big data and AI. Obviously, Amazon, who hasn't shopped on Amazon, and after shopping the first item, then you start getting all sorts of quote-unquote suggestions of where to waste your money. Not sure if you realize that, but even Uber, it's on the big data and AI business. Some people think that Uber is in the business of having drivers drive people from A to B, but that's not exactly true. Uber is one of the biggest investors on driverless cars today, or on driverless cars technology. This means that for them, the business is basically taking someone to place A to place B, and the driver is not really needed. And so just as we hear about Google creating driverless cars, Uber is also there, and it is because they do understand their business, and they're going to be using, again, big data and AI. And if we look into other places, obviously medicine is taking very big leaps in order to help us diagnose people and treat people. And so is all sorts of weird places like the travel industry, where a fact that I was not aware is that today as we're speaking, most planes are able to get off, fly, and sometimes even touch down without the need of having a pilot. And so even though there are pilots in every flight, this might not be the case in some years to go. You may have like a remote pilot just making sure that everything's okay, and if needed, just intervening. But again, every industry, regardless of which one you're looking for, is actually going to be modernized and revolutionized by the use of big data, AI, and all the rest of the technologies that we have in here. How does this affect directly testing? And again, just to give you an idea of how are we going to be affected by this, think about the following points that I do believe are going to be happening very, very, very soon, if not right now. First of all, I was mentioning that automation became a commodity. I do believe that it will be even better within the years because we will be using big data and AI approaches in order to better recognize objects and modifications to objects in order to correct those recognitions and make your automation more robust. So again, I see it today. I see many tools out there that are actually approaching this level. It's actually pretty nice to see it. One of the things that I think will be happening really soon is going to be the use of big data and artificial intelligence in order to perform better risk analysis and so better test planning. So instead of trying to say, hey, which test cases do I need to run right now? I've seen a number of presentations and conferences lately where people are saying, hey, you know what? We will say these are the changes that have happened on our version control repository. We will look into the different user stories that you have, and we will tell you, a system will tell you these are the scenarios you should be running. Okay, so it's really coming soon to a QA department nearby, but expect it. Same will go for bug patterns. Many times we use our quote-unquote intuition in order to know where to look for bugs. But what we're doing is basically looking for patterns. We know that if we're finding 1, 2, 3 bugs in this area, then apparently there are going to be more bugs in those areas. So using these patterns, using this big data analysis, then we will be able to, again, help testers or help organizations test better. And finally, just as part of, again, this demo, even though there are many, many other forks, I know that we'll be having better automatic defect analysis and prioritization. So just by understanding how we prioritize stuff, how our users are working with the system, then we will have big data analysis that will allow us to say, hey, this is exactly what's happening on the bug and how to prioritize it, how to solve it. All of that will be done more automatically in the future. So again, it's happening, it's coming. Some of that is happening really now, and you see it if you learn and if you read and if you listen. You will see all of that taking place right now. And obviously, it will be more accelerated as time goes by and as we get even more technology taking place today. The next point after we talked about big data and AI is to talk about another concept that it's maybe foolish or impossible to ignore, and that is the concept of DevOps. Now, for those of you who are, you know what, I want to do something here. I like to do it sometimes. How many of you attend in the system? Please raise your hands if you're working on an organization that it's either your team doing DevOps or part of your organization is doing DevOps by yourself. So if you could raise your hands, I would like to see again how many people. Go ahead, don't be shy. Counting, 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 guys. A little bit more. Okay, so I see a little bit below 20% of the people attending this call who are working in places that are doing DevOps at this point. I would have guessed it's a little bit more, but again, that's also a good approach. So DevOps, just for those of you who are not aware of what it is or how it happened, then what happened is the following. We used to have agile methodologies. So I guess that all of us by now, hopefully, if you haven't been living under a rock, you should know what agile means. It's basically the iterative process where instead of having very long development cycles, we have shorter ones. We do review, we create the software, we build it, test it, design it. Everything's actually done together. Plan, design, build, test, review. All of that is doing. Again, iteratively, you might be working in iterations. You might call them sprints. You might call them other things that take between a week to 3, 4 weeks. But the idea is that you're breaking your development process down into smaller chunks in order to help you deliver faster and get better feedback, and again, have more control over your process. So that started happening back around the start of the 2000s, more or less. So it's almost 20 years overall. People say that it's around 99, 98. And together with that, we had another, not methodological advance, but a technological advance of cloud computing. So cloud computing meant that instead of releasing, as I was saying, a software as disks, you had your own cloud, your SaaS, software as a service, or cloud computing or hosted environment where you just deployed your application. It started with websites, obviously. Then you had e-commerce sites. And today you can have any type of software as a service, platform as a service, anything actually can run on the cloud. So what happened is that we combined both agile methodologies together with cloud computing, and we got to the concept of DevOps. It became trivial. A lot of companies independently reached the place where they were working DevOps, And then we started having a better discussion, a better understanding of what it means to be DevOps. But I have talked a lot about DevOps without explaining what DevOps is, so let me take you to this place. And for me, this is a graph that basically explains DevOps once and for all, because it has most of the moving parts of the definition. First of all, the word DevOps comes from the fact that we have development and operations working together. So we used to have two teams. We used to have the development team who used to create the product. And then once the product was created, we put it on disk and we send it to someone on the operations field, someone who actually was in the IT, manning the servers, and they would install the system and just make sure that it worked correctly. What we understood is that it's better whenever someone actually finds an issue on the operation side, it becomes faster to solve it if we have development close by. The same goes. If we on development knows better how operations work, then we will be able to create a better product for them. And so these teams started working more and more together until a number of companies decided that they will do combined teams that have people from development together with people from operations, and they would be in charge of basically releasing and maintaining their systems. Okay, and so we got into the DevOps approach. Now, DevOps is not a methodology. DevOps is an approach, is a way of working. And the idea of DevOps is that you stop separating between the processes. The DevOps process will start, first of all, obviously, by planning what you want to create or write. Then you basically code it, you build it, and you test it and release it. This will be your agile process, just as we had it all the time. But now what happens is that the same team will be in charge not only of releasing, but deploying it into the production environments, operating it, meaning, okay, so it's running, we have monitors, and we know what's going on in there. And based on the information, based on the data that we're gathering here, then we will be able to plan ahead and make better code. So again, you see how this becomes a cycle where we plan, code, build, test, then we release it, deploy it, operate it, and based on the monitoring, we know where, again, to continue planning. So this is what DevOps means. Now, the issue here is that once you become a tester on a DevOps team, then basically your day-to-day reality changes quite a lot. And why is that? Because as we said, maybe coming back here, it becomes very easy to fix stuff. So the economies of finding bugs on this place might change. Who's going to be running the test case on this place might change. On the other hand, the feedback that we can provide in order to create a better product stops being so much in this area here and starts being more on this area here where we operate and we monitor. We see how people are actually working with the system, and if there are issues, then we're able to see. So it's not that the life of the tester has been mitigated and we don't need testers anymore. It's just that it changed, but it changed radically. How did it change? Well, when we start doing DevOps, we need to ask ourselves, as a DevOps team, maybe not as a tester, also as a tester, but as a DevOps team, some pretty quote-unquote non-trivial questions. And the type of non-trivial questions are going to be the following. For example, again, you will ask yourselves quite a lot of questions. But how much testing do I need to do before we release? As I mentioned, okay, you do need to test before you release. You need to make sure that you don't have any critical bugs that will lose all the data of your users. But if there's a bug that we might be able to fix it once we have released the product, it's not that critical, and on the other hand, I might waste not a lot of time testing, then I might leave it to the end because it's more economic for me to release that bug than to fix it before. Remember, it's a whole new reality out there. Also, you may ask yourselves, how should you deploy the product? Remember, we used to waste a lot of time testing installations of the product. But again, I remember I used to manage a team of testers. Half my team was in charge of installation and upgrading of the system. I'm not kidding. I used to have, I think, about 25 testers, and 13 of them were on the team that was testing the installation and the deployment and the rollout of the product. We don't need to do all of that anymore. Obviously, yes, we need to know how to deploy, but it's not as it used to be previously. So again, the economics of what we're doing is changing. Also, if we said that most of what we want to learn about the product will be done on production, then very early in the process, we need to ask ourselves, as QA specialists, what do we need to monitor? If I want to know if people are working with the system or people are gathering bugs or stuff like that, those are questions that I need to make sure to instrument, to have that data as part of the monitoring so that if there are problems, I will be able to find them easily. So not only are we shifting the work that we were doing, maybe not testing so much before, maybe not testing so much at all, but we need to start asking ourselves questions that were not relevant anymore. Well, monitoring, yes, you should have logs on the product every time you have logs, but right now logs or monitoring become quite more important here. Notice that what is happening is that when we switch over to DevOps, quite a lot of the focus that we were putting on testing as a QA manager, we're doing 90% of our work was focused on testing. Right now, we're actually talking about quality. So if you ask me, moving to DevOps doesn't mean that you're not testing or your work as a tester, actually the value of yourself as a tester is going down. No, it's not. It's actually shifting towards something that we have, quote unquote, wanted to do all our lives, and that is focused more on quality and less of testing. As if I paraphrase something that I've heard from Alan Page, and I know it's not his, I know he takes it from somewhere else, where he used to say that all of the testing is getting in the way of quality. So we're basically helping ourselves to focus more on quality and maybe a little bit less on testing. And why? Again, because we're focusing on DevOps. So let's take a closer look into DevOps. So what should a tester do on a DevOps team? By the way, someone's asking if this session is only about DevOps. No, it's not. I'm talking about DevOps, but I'm going to be talking about more testing a little bit later on. Okay? But when you're going to be working on DevOps, just take into account, again, promise this is the last slide on that. Obviously, as a tester, we're focusing on planning, we're focusing on testing, we're focusing on monitor that I just mentioned before. But one of the things that I've seen quite a lot when people the testers start working in DevOps environments is that they also start participating quite a lot of building, releasing, and deploying. Building, why? Because I talk about automation, and quite a lot of the automation is how do we build the product, deploy it into our testing environments, and test it. So we have quite a lot of the building here. The same deploying that we will be using in here, it will also be used on the deployment to production. We see it quite a lot. And also the release process, obviously, is going to be around the testing criteria and the stuff that we need to have in there. So take into account, if you are migrating to a hosted or cloud or other type of environment like that, it will be a lot of changes, but it doesn't mean that you will be doing less work. You might be doing more work. And not only that, but if you look into these type of releases, and again, this is not limited only to DevOps. This is maybe more along organizations doing more agile work and organizations working on faster releases. One of the things that has affected me the most or opened my eyes the most is a definition by Brent Jensen. Brent Jensen, for those of you who don't know, it's, well, he used to be a test manager at Microsoft. Right now, he's more of a data scientist, team manager on Microsoft. Still, he has one of the best podcasts out there on testing called the A/B Testing Podcast with, again, with Alan Page. And one of the things that Brent has been saying quite a lot is that the role of testing and the role of quality assurance in software has been shifting more and more towards the definition of we're here in order to accelerate the achievement of shippable quality. It's not about testing all the time. We're also obviously also doing testing, but we're not here in order to test all the time. We're not here in order to find all the bugs. We're here in order to help our teams to accelerate that shippable quality that we need to do as part of our teams. Okay, so I want you to think about this because it all of a sudden opens up what we need to do as testers to a whole range of additional stuff that needs to be done in there. By the way, I see that there are many questions in here, so I'm going to try to go over them towards the end of the session, again, just as a reminder. So we're talking about quality, we're talking about shipping quality, we're talking about shifting of our responsibilities and shifting of the stuff that we need to do. By the way, sorry for the background noise, but there's an open window here, so I hope that it's not bothering too much. There is a question that I need to ask, and I have been asking myself quite a lot lately, and that is whether our works as testers is dying. Meaning, if, well, I'm only 43 years old, I need to actually provide food for my family at least for the next 20, 25 years. Should I be looking for another job right now? And I think the testing is not dying yet, and I will talk a little bit more about that very soon. But I do believe that it will continue to change drastically in the coming years. Okay, and so it's not that testing is dying, but testing as we know it today is actually changing. Testing is what I like to call morphing, like going over a metamorphosis where instead of being that bud, we're actually becoming that butterfly maybe. Let's make it a little bit less colorful. But I do believe the testing is really, really changing. And again, remember, we're changing because our whole environment, our whole applications, or the way that we're developing is actually changing. So if we used to be concentrated on testing, and our developers wouldn't even give us the time of day, I see more and more organizations where many testers are spending a lot of their time training and coaching their developers. And why? Because they are doing a lot of testing. And I remember something that I was talking to Matt Hauser. By the way, if you don't know Matt, he's also a pretty cool tester. And we're saying that, yes, if we look into the amount of testers working on a project, it might be going down a little. But on the other hand, we have so many additional projects doing testing that the overall number of testers in the world is growing. So because we have less testers per team testing, and we have more developers per team testing, then we will be doing quite a lot of job, basically training, coaching, showing our developers how to test, and we will still have quite a lot of testing, but we will be concentrated on that hard-to-do testing and maybe give coaching of people more how to test. I'm also seeing quite a lot how, as I was saying, we are having more automation in our teams, so quite a lot of the stuff that testers are doing is defining their testing frameworks and their testing processes. It's more about the high-level stuff, more about the policies. Okay, wait a second. So these are the processes. These are the gates that we need to pass before we can actually release. These are the processes if we need to roll back, if we need to do something like that. So we are spending quite a lot of time on that. I also see us, if you look into the testing results, doing more of the analysis of the results and less of the generation of the manual results. So if we're doing more automation, and again, we're still doing quite a lot of manual testing, but we're spending more and more time trying to make sense out of what we're seeing. Okay, so for me, that's also an upgrade. We're doing the intelligent stuff more than the manual stuff, and that is something that is actually nice. And another thing that it really, really excites me is that we're actually working closer to other parts of the organization. We're working closer to customers to understand what really hurts and how to test. We're working closer with executives who really need our information in order to make those quick decisions. If we're releasing once every month, then they need to know whether to release or not. And we are working with other teams in order to help us define what quality actually means for our products. So it used to be that we used to be testing. Again, you could have very junior people doing testing because everything that you need was to find the bugs. I think that right now the job of a tester is becoming more challenging, and it's becoming more higher level, where we need to do more of the thinking work. And again, still do a lot of the testing work, but focus mostly on the testing work. If I look into testing in 30 years, I'm not sure if it's going to be 20 years or 15 years or 30 years or 40 years. I do believe that in the end, testing as we know it today will pass. We won't need people running tests manually. We might have combined teams of maybe developers in tests and stuff like that, and maybe test analysts and test architects, but testing as manual testers, we know it won't be necessary because we will have other stuff happening. Again, I don't see it happening right now. I don't believe that it will happen in the next 5 years, definitely not 10 years. There are still many, many organizations out there relying solely on manual testing, and they will stay like that for quite a while. But testing, as the definition that we used to do, it will pass from the world, and we will be focusing on other stuff related to quality and also related to testing, but on a different level. Okay, so if testing will eventually die, then how can we actually make sure that we're gonna keep with a work that is worth value? And this is what I want to talk. This is the second part of the presentation. And this is how I think that we all can keep ahead of the curve and actually become, sorry for the word, kick-ass testers within our organizations. And as I was saying before, I wish I had a step-by-step guide on do this, do that, exercise like this, and drink this, energy drink and everything will be okay. I think that it's very still very raw in order to know what to be done, but I do believe that looking into what's going on around us, there are some things that we can do in order to make sure that at least we're going to be headed on the right direction. And I do want to talk about these points right now. So again, there are a number of things, and if I want to, I need to start from one of them, and I don't think that it's an importance or relevance to the number of things that I'm saying here. But the first thing that I would actually recommend is to be part of the change in the testing role. And let me talk about myself. I'm a person who has a very hard time changing stuff. Okay, I like no one to move my cheese, and I drink coffee out of the same cup every single day, and I organize my desk and stuff like that. But we need to understand that there is change in testing, and basically to cover our eyes and ears and say, no, it's not going to happen, it's not going to take you anywhere. So I think that instead of being rooted on the past of testing, we actually need to look at the needs for the future and look over everything that we talked about now, if it's Agile, if it's DevOps, if it's AI and big data. Try to understand how, first of all, we have different needs because of the speed that we're releasing and the environment we're releasing, but also how we can use part of the advantages of technology today. Now, how do you do it? How do you do that? Today, it's easier than ever. Believe me, you can read, you can listen, you can ask. You can definitely participate. And one of the things that I recommend every single junior tester that I talk to, and even senior tester, don't be afraid. You need to write whatever you're thinking about, take part of conferences, try stuff in your team, make sure to fail fast, fail greatly, and then learn from your failures in order to continue succeeding. How do you do that? Well, that's the simple part, actually. If you want to learn more today and want to participate, you have resources today that 20 years ago when we started, we could not even imagine them. You have stuff like the Ministry of Testing where you can get unlimited number of resources of how to learn about testing. You have conferences like the online test conf that I was talking about, and many other test dashes that are locals and meetups that are locals over there that you can actually see. You have countless places for information like magazines like Tea Time with Testers, and you have podcasts everywhere. And I really like, not every podcast is good, need to say, but listen to them and decide by yourself. For example, I really, really love the A/B testing podcast by Alan and Brent. I think that it's really an eye-opener thing. If you want to be up to speed with everything that's happening around technology and testing, see Test Talks, and obviously Twitter and quite a lot of feeds. So be ahead of the curve by understanding what's going on, being part of what's going on. If you can participate in a conference, do it. You don't need to be an expert speaker. Some of the best sessions I saw in my last conference came from people who this was the first time they were speaking. They brought some incredible stuff. And believe me, people will look into how you present it, they will look into what you present, and you will gain confidence and become better at that. Okay, so if you want to learn about more conferences, talk to me after this session and I will point you in the right direction. Go ahead and do it. The second thing that I think is extremely important in order to, again, be a better tester today is to become pie-shaped or a pie-shaped tester. And I'm stealing this from my friend, Dirk-Jan de Groot. He's an agile coach and a test manager from the Netherlands, and he was talking to me about this, I think it was last week and the week before. It used to be the case that we were defining people as T-shaped testers, where you were very good at testing and had a specialization, and so the letter T came into place because you have, again, the broad shoulders for, again, testing in general, but then you specialize in something. And what he was telling me, and I think that he's correct, it's not enough to specialize in one thing. You need to specialize at least in 2, 3, or 4 things. And so the pie actually came into place. And so we need to become, and again, stealing from Alan Page, to become a generalized specialist. And what does it mean? A generalized specialist is someone who, on the one hand, has a very broad general perspective, in this case about testing as a whole, meaning you're one of those guys who they give you a screen and you will be able to basically smell out the bugs in them. But you also need to have some specialty, very deep down in 2, 3, 4 specific areas that you will be able to apply to testing. Now, many times people ask me, so what area should I specialize? Okay, there are plenty. And again, you don't really need to choose. Obviously, choose the ones that are closer to you. But just to give you a couple of ideas, you can be a specialized in automation, security, Usability of applications. Obviously, embedded systems and Internet of Things is something. Monitoring mobile devices, anything that you see here and everything that you don't see here. Healthcare and pharma. E-commerce, it's an old one, but again, still relevant. Genetics, medicine. Make sure that you have that broad spectrum that will help you to be an all-around tester, but also you will need to be specialized in 1, 2, or 3 areas. Especially if you're working on an agile team, then you see this quite a lot. Everyone has like a broad perspective on development, but then you have specialization of stuff that you're doing. So that is one of the best things that you can become in order to be a tester. It used to be the case that we said that everyone needed to be a Swiss Army knife where you could do everything. You know what? Not really everything. I think that you should have a very nice plate and this will be your general stuff. And then specialize on the scissors, maybe on the course crew if you want. Okay, but it's a very important thing in order to be able to succeed in testing today. Looking at other stuff, I see that we're running a little bit late, so I'm going to try to cut again here a little bit and talk faster on this. As I was mentioning before, the role of the tester has become more of a leadership role and a training role. So if you are working in an agile team, realize that you should be training your testers to test. And so make sure that as a leader, you can define and maintain a process that makes sense. And the important part here is make sense. This to be something that everyone will agree that it's useful, that provides value. Don't test only because you need to be testing. Try to understand what makes sense to your team and to your project and do it. Train your programmers, because their programming doesn't mean that they don't need to know how to test. So if you need to teach them how to do test-driven development or exploratory testing or concept like cross-testing where they're not going to be testing their own software or pairwise testing or anything like that, again, remember, it is your responsibility to show them how to test better. And also, don't be afraid. Make sure you have the right tools in place to support your testing. Not every automatic test needs to be done using Perl scripts or Python scripts. You can actually have different tools for that. If you need a test management tool, obviously I'm biased, but go ahead and get one. I suggest PractiTest, but no, seriously now. Make sure that you have your tools. Just as you don't expect your salespeople to sell without a CRM team, and you don't expect a mechanic to fix stuff without their tools, or developers to write code without an IDE, don't expect people to test without having good testing tools in place. Okay, so expect your team to actually buy them and get them there. Now, talking about testing and about tools in place, you need to have the correct infrastructure. Now, a testing infrastructure is not only a tool, it's not only Jenkins, not only Selenium running on Jenkins if you want. It starts from the testing environments. And notice I didn't say environment, I meant environments. You will need more than one usually. Make sure that as part of your infrastructure, and I mentioned this before, you have an automatic deployment process. Many times what will happen is that deployment process, automatic deployment process, will go over to production if needed. But that basically means that whenever you get a new build, it won't take you 2 hours just to deploy it. It should be a press of a button. Again, this should be part of the stuff that you're doing as part of your infrastructure. If you're talking about teams that are doing Agile, and again, DevOps, if needed, make sure that you have continuous integration, continuous testing. Not even talking about continuous deployment yet. You don't need to be there. But as part of your testing infrastructure, testing shouldn't take that long. And testing feedback shouldn't take long at all in order to get to people. And remember to share everything done with your development and with the rest of the teams. Okay, so if you're doing testing and you have data and feedback, then make sure that your testing infrastructure will be able to notify everything about what's going on here, so that everyone has 100% visibility into what you're testing, or maybe the testing of your team is actually providing. And I see that as an inseparable part of your testing infrastructure. Now, stuff that we need also to do, and I think this is trivial, and I'm happy that I'm seeing this more and more and more, is that as we become better testers, it's very difficult to separate quality and the stuff from testing than what the user is doing and what the product owner is doing. So make sure that as a tester and as someone who is actually leading testing, you will not only look at the user stories. This is one of the basic mistakes that I see. Okay, so the user story said do this, this, and this. Wait a second. Analyze the user story. What's the need behind it? What's the logic behind it? Many times, just as we used to find bugs in requirements, there might be bugs in user stories because the need does not take into account the existing product or any other type of constraints. So just as we used to say, test your requirements, go ahead and test your user stories. Make sure that you analyze the need. And this being the voice of the user or the advocate of the user, maybe in front of the product owner. One of the biggest tools that I can actually define for you or suggest is to create personas. Personas are user profiles, and they basically help your team focus on who they're developing for. Many times, you will need to translate to your developers the stuff that is missing, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But if we have a user story, even though the process might be complete, there are some things that are not going to be complete, and this is regarding to this point. Again, there are many non-functional requirements or non-functional parts of the user stories or the work that we have that it's not going to be there. And it's our job as testers to complete that story. It might be, I was in a presentation last week about how response time is very damaging to what users are actually experiencing today. So that is very important. Obviously, UX, integration with other features, with other systems, all of that is going to be very, very important. And again, many times people don't look at that when they create the user stories and the product owners. And by the way, one of the things that I'm seeing quite a lot lately is that because testers do this work so well, they become the product owners. Okay, and they start being the person within their teams and outside of their teams who they're actually defining those features and those user stories because they are a better product owner than many other people in their organic organizations. Okay, just to keep it in mind. Now, moving quickly, we need to look for quality outside of testing. And we were mentioning that before. We're working with deployments and environments that are actually working in production. So even after you release the product, you don't stop testing. Look for usage patterns. And I like here working mainly with two different patterns. First of all, visual patterns. There are many tools out there that will let you see offline how your users are moving their mouse and pressing on different stuff and seeing how they're working with the product. I love it. All of a sudden you start seeing that people don't find the stuff that you thought would be trivial or press more than once or, again, do quite a lot of mistakes, and that is great in order to get feedback. You can also get analytics patterns. For example, if you release a new feature and you talk about it for everyone and you see that you see like slow clicks or people who are only using it once, maybe you didn't define it so well. Maybe the feature was not written so correctly. So you have a lot of information that you see there. Try, as I was saying, generate metrics and metrics dashboards as much as you can with live statistics. You need to define that up front. It needs to be part of the product. It needs to be a user story that will tell you, okay, we need to have this and this instrumentation so that we have those metrics where we need. And also remember, not only it's about defining those metrics, it's also defining the acceptable thresholds, okay? When is something not good? When is some response time not good? When is some slow usage or slow adoption not good? So that people don't need to think about this as they're running. It needs to be something that was defined up front so that at least you can raise an alert to that. Now remember, this is quality that is outside of the testing. This is quality that is happening on production and is one of the biggest things that we could do. Today, this is different than what we used to do. Now, one of the nicest things that I also think testers can do is to become bridges to other teams. And we've been doing this all the time, but if we're part of an organic agile team and we can help our teams do it better, then we're very good at looking at the broader picture. So we're good at asking questions. We're actually very good at creating formal and informal bridges. And that basically means that we're good at talking. We're good at asking questions to people outside of our teams, and we're not usually afraid of doing that. And if we do this on an organized fashion, we will be able to bring that information back into our team and make sure that these guys actually get a better understanding, a better idea on how to do their work better. And because of this, because we are very good at talking and at bridging with other people and coordinating, I'm also seeing that it's not very uncommon to see that testers actually take upon the roles of Scrum Masters within their teams. Okay, so if someone asks you to be a Scrum Master or even Product Owner, as I was mentioned before, don't shy away from it. Many times you will be the most capable person of doing that within your Agile team, if you want. Now, almost towards the end, many people are talking about shifting left. I believe that it's not only about shifting left. We need to shift left, shift right, go up, and go deep. And what do I mean by that? Well, shifting left might be trivial. We need to go deeper into user stories, seeing that the product is defined correctly, and we can do that as part of the testing using our understanding of how the team actually should work. But we can also shift right, and I have been talking about that quite a lot, go into deployments, go into the production environments, try to understand how quality is being seen live in our products. So this shifting both left and right. And by the way, I was talking about the online test conf. I think we have a conference about a session about shifting left and shifting right. When I talk to people and when I try to understand, I think that not only it's about shift and right, first of all, we can go up. We need to open direct channels with stakeholders and managers, especially if you work in a company that is not very big. Don't be afraid of talking to your CXOs, maybe salespeople, production people. What do they need, what information they need, and how can you help you? You will be amazed how much people actually react correctly about that, and will help you out to understand how to do your work better. And you can also go deep. Again, remember, you can go about how everyone in the team is actually working and how to do good work within your teams and between your teams, okay? So not only look up, look also next to you and see how you can be a good catalyst on how everyone's actually doing their work. Now, finally, because I know that we're reaching almost the end, my last piece of advice in order to keep ahead of the curve is to keep your eyes open and learn to adapt, okay? Yes, stuff is changing, it's become a little bit hectic, but it's also taking place over time. You can be part of the change. You don't need to be affected by it. You can be actually part of who's doing the change and who's driving the change. If you understand you cannot fight this change, then you will also be able to do it. And again, I'm talking to people like me, people who, myself, for many, many years, I didn't want to be part of this change that is going on. And lately I understood that it's better to be part of it than to fight it and lose. Basically, it's also something good. The best way to do it is to look into your own organization. Don't look very far away. If you look into what technologies you're doing, what methodologies you're doing, look at where your new place for value resides. If it's going to be on testing, it's on testing. If it's going to be on training testing, it's going to be on training testing. If it's going to be on getting information from production, then that is the place where you need to be. So look where your organization is taking you. Remember, everyone is changing because technology is changing, and technology is driving a very big revolution here. So that is also going to be the change that will define where your value resides. And a thing that always helps, especially testers, is to work on your social skills and on your communication skills. It's not only about being technical, it's also about knowing how to communicate and how to interact. And many of us are introverts. That might be cute, but it's not useful. So you need to learn how to talk, you need to learn how to listen, and you need to learn how to interact. If you do all of that, then again, you will be able to adapt easier and faster. So before we actually turn to questions, I just want to sum it up a little bit. The world is changing, and we are in the middle of a technological revolution. And as part of that revolution, testing is not the main character, but it's definitely also included. Change is also an opportunity to raise and excel. Okay, it means that if you have your eyes open, if you're smart enough and you have the right opportunities to do it, that change will also help you to accelerate your, again, your value. And I've seen many, many testers rise into other places, and again, places where they're also doing very, very great job. And in order to be part of this change, you should be proactive. Be part of the change. Remember that you need to have a pie-shaped approach to be a generalist and specialist at the same time. Remember that part of your job will be to lead and train and look outside of your testing in order to provide better product. Shift up, shift down, shift left, shift right, and remember to constantly adapt in order to make sure that you're providing the good value. Now, on a personal note, before we actually move to questions, and if you have questions, you can start asking them now. One of the things that I really like telling people, basically those who are starting in testing, is that when I started out testing, it was quite a long time ago. For the first time, don't recall if it was 3, 4, 5 years, I really wanted not to be a tester. I started testing because it was the best job I could find out of college, during college actually. And I really wanted to be doing something else. I wanted to be a product owner. I wanted to be a support specialist. I wanted to do quite a lot of things. But then I was able to understand all the opportunities and all the challenges and all the pretty cool stuff that was changing around me and was happening in the testing arena. And that is when I realized that the future of testing was pretty exciting. That's when I decided to stay. And again, it's been a pretty cool ride and something that I recommend to everyone who I think they have, again, the gut and the value and the mind in order to be a right tester. So look into what's going on and look for your opportunities in that. And now I want to go over to some questions. So let me actually go over some of the questions that I see here. So again, I will go over some of the questions that were asked before. And if you have more questions, go ahead and ask them. Sorry that I need to read them and go over them. Okay. It says here that manual testing can be dispensed away with. Let's assume that manual testing can be dispensed away with. It still takes time, and automation can only be done after tests are identified manually as functional at the system level. How can testing scale in terms of speed and development? So I'm not saying that the work of testing has been done. I do believe that manual testing is still very much something that is needed. And I do believe that we will have a lot of manual testing happening. What I also believe is that a lot of those manual testing that is being done, again, it can be done automatically, will be done automatically pretty soon. And I also believe that not only testers have the vocation or the responsibility to run manual testing. So quite a lot of the manual tests will be done by developers or other people in the organization. So that is something to take into account. Yes, functional tests need to be defined and identified. I believe that within, I'm not sure if it's going to be 10, 15, 20, or 30 years, most of the definition of those test cases will be done by AI and big data. Okay, so this is where part of the technological revolution will come, where a lot of that definition for testing, first manually and then automatic, will actually be done by other technical stuff that will be able to do that even better than we are. There's a question here, is it more common than not to have QA tests prior to the release, or is this prior testing mostly supposed to be done by dev? And I think that we're talking here about, we were talking here in DevOps, and sorry, I'm shifting like this, I don't remember where that was. Oh, come on. Okay, so the testing in here, many people think that, again, it can be done or will be done mostly by developers. I don't believe that's the case. I still see that it used to be that when people shifted to Agile directly, and forget about DevOps, even Agile, there were not testers in teams. And I think that was part of the pendulum going very much to the right. And as the pendulum actually went a little bit more to the center, people realized that, no, you cannot dispense with testers, because developers do not know really how to test efficiently, and they don't know how to do the more interesting test cases that find the more interesting bugs. And so quite a lot of the test cases that are happening within Agile teams are still being done by testers. And if it used to be the case that you had no testers per Agile functional team, then you had one. I'm seeing right now where if you have 4 developers, you might have 2 testers in there. Okay, just to make sure that they have all the load of the testing. And still, they are doing quite a lot of the testing, and they're also teaching their developers how to test. So I don't see most of the testing here being done by other people. I think the testers are going to be focusing on the interesting testing here. On the other hand, I do believe that the overall number of test cases being running here is going to go down as we start monitoring more on that. Okay, so it's kind of a trade-off, but I do see, let's say, the bulk of our work as testers still being done in this place in here. Again, and if you see it as an Agile team, then see it like this. If you see it as a DevOps team, then you see the whole one. But still, we're going to be pretty busy in here, at least for the time being, at least for the next 10, 15 years. Okay, more questions here. As a former graphic designer converted to UI developer a year ago, I'm starting to learn testing, and I'm very interested in becoming a full-time tester. What advice and resources can you suggest to learn the job? If you want to learn more about testing, there are, again, tons of resources. If we're coming here, I think it's the first slide in here. Yes, this one here. everything in here, it's a great resource to start. If you're looking, for example, for articles, go to Ministry of Testing, go to Tea Time with Testers. By the way, Ministry of Testing, they have an aggregation of blogs that is very amazing. If you're looking for presentations, you can go to conferences online or on-site that you have in there. If you want specific information, go to to all the different podcasts. You have so many sources of information. But the hard question is where to start, not where to find it. We have quite a lot. So I would start doing kind of a buffet, trying a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And if you want to have specific stuff, then again, contact me. And I'll be happy, if you explain a little bit more about what you're doing, I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. I don't think that we have any more questions. And by the way, I do see that the time has gone. So guys, thank you very much for your time. Just again, very quickly to go towards the end. Oh, come on. Let's see where the presentation goes. So we're here and here and here. So just a reminder about the online test conf. If you want to go ahead and sign up, go ahead and do it. It's for free. And again, we will have some pretty cool presentations. And as I was mentioning, if someone wants to get in touch with me, this is my personal email address. And again, it's my own address. So I go over every email. I answer every email that I get, sometimes not very quickly. But if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. So guys, thank you very much for your time. And we will be sending the presentation. I think it's going to be posted on YouTube and sharing the slides with you until coming to the 3 days. So thank you very much for your time, guys. And again, I hope you enjoyed it. And this is Joe from PractiTest signing up and saying goodbye. Thank you very much.